Hey folks, and welcome back to Lonely Horde Guitars. As I've mentioned before, we're mostly about guitars, but sometimes we're about amplification. And what we have here is the Mojotone 25th anniversary guitar amp. And we're going to be assembling this over the next couple of days. So everything's laid out. I've done a rough inventory to make sure I got all the parts, but we'll go through that in detail too. Mojotone's really good about getting stuff out to you, but if you're planning on working on it, then there's going to be a couple days before the new stuff shows up. The other thing I've done is I built a very temporary lift here so that I can work on the chassis. It's pretty straightforward, just some scrap wood glued and then screwed so that I've got a mechanical joint, and the height is basically the height of the chassis plus the tallest transformer and a little bit of buffer. For tools, we're going to need wire strippers, soldering iron, solder, a number 1, number 2, and number 3 screwdriver, and some nut drivers, 1/4 inch, 5/16, and 11/32. So let's get going. Okay, so now we're going to do the inventory. It comes with the wiring diagram we have here, and that's pretty nice. But this kit actually has instructions, which I think is new, with a nice inventory of what we're supposed to have. I'm not going to make you watch it. I'll do like a quick scrub through, but I'm just going to go through the entire kit, make sure I've got everything that's on the list, so I don't have to stop once I start working on the kit. Okay, so we do seem to have some discrepancies. Now I wonder if the instructions and the parts list are reused, and maybe these things that are missing aren't actually on the wiring diagram. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that appears to be the case for this. So this isn't on the wiring diagram. And then let's look at our 1 meg resistors. Okay, so it looks like what's going on here is this list is not correct, but what is listed here is correct and matches. So I will double check the rest of this just to make sure where there are discrepancies they aren't actually a need. But so we seem to match what the box says we're supposed to have, but we don't match what this inventory says we're supposed to have. And so far the box aligns with the wiring diagram. Okay, we're going to start with our transformers. We need to install some rubber grommets so the wires can go through without scraping. These 2 holes appear to not be used. And I did make one change to my rack here. I've got 2 little pieces of wood here, and that's basically when I'm working like this, I can't accidentally slide it off the edge and have it drop. Now we're going to mount the biggest transformer, the power transformer. So in that one, we've got a couple of wires that may be a little bit confusing. There are 2 oranges and 2 blacks. We want the thicker ones of those to go through the bottom hole, and we want the brown and the red with the yellow stripe to also go through that hole. Now the chassis is upside down here, so it is kind of reversed. This is the bottom hole, this is the top hole from the perspective of the wiring diagram. And then all the rest of the wires we want to feed through the top hole. And then shuffle this guy over here till we can get the screw holes lined up. And the next transformer. And in this case, looks like we want orange and the gray, and the yellow and the green to go out the bottom, which is this. And the red, yellow, or red, white, and brown to go out the top. This transformer is already nicely partitioned that way. There's no ambiguity here. For these transformers, we're using these number 8s. Yeah, looks like I've managed to push the grommet out. So be careful of that. And then finally, the choke transformer. Only one hole for wires, only 2 wires. Okay, next step is we want to put these clamps on that are going to hold the big capacitors. So on these, it's using these long number 6 screws. But on one of the tabs for each, we also want to include a ground tab. And on these two, right here, wiring diagram shows it on the spot closest to the transformers. And over here, the spot away from the transformers. So we'll go ahead and get these in place with the one without the tab. And then we're gonna maneuver this a little bit so that it's easier to hold everything in place. Camera, see what I'm doing here? Okay, so I've got the screw through, little ground tab, and then we'll put the nut over that. And I find that it's a little easier to wait to snug these down really tight until you've actually got the capacitors in there, which is the next step. And we'll put the capacitors in here, and then we want the ground close to ground, which is the black, close to where our ground lug is. And this is why sometimes these need to stretch just a little bit. There we go. Now we can snug these down. All right, next, we want to put in these power tube sockets. If you just lay them in here, they can go either way. There's a notch, and you want that towards the edge of the chassis. Additionally, I've got these spring clip retainers that need to go in on top. And for this screw right here, we also need to do a ground tab. So again, we have kind of a finagly little thing to deal with. So we'll attach it first for the easy stuff, and then flip it sideways to try and get that ground tab on there, because these screws, they just barely make it. And then the springs are going to want to pull things all over the place. It's not the easiest thing to get together. And once you get in here actually doing the wiring, you might rearrange how you've got this tab. Then that's easy enough to loosen and move around. Now we're going to do our small tubes, and these don't have a notch. They do have like sort of a blank space between pins, and that you want towards the inner part of the chassis. Now these don't have any ground straps or anything attached to them, so they should go on pretty easily. All right, next steps, if you go by the instructions, they want you to assemble sort of the side components here. So outlet, etc., get all this sort of tied in, everything except the effects loop. But if you do that, notice that it gets harder to maneuver in here, especially with these very long fuse jacks. You can't really get to the pins on the tube sockets very well. So we're going to do things a little bit differently. Instead of going straight to that, we're going to start wiring things, but we're going to wire sort of up. You know, for example, let's get these two wires out of the way because they just go to this ground strap here, and then we'll ground the caps while they're nice and easily accessible. We'll do our heater wires and any of the surrounding bits and bobs here on the tube sockets. And then as we get ready to, okay, now we can do power and stuff like that, as we kind of close up all the things that need to be done here. So let's start that. First thing we want to do, we've got a lot of extra wire that's in our way, but it's only ever going to go here. So we'll trim that off, and we'll also do the ground strap here from the capacitor. Well, I thought I was recording until the camera turned off. So what I've done here is I've used the bus wire to go through the lower hole of this ground tab and trim these wires, twisted them, pushed it through the top hole, and used a pair of pliers just to make sure I've got a nice strong mechanical connection. Now I will snip off the spare bus wire here. Give this a little squeeze so it's nice and tight. And then we'll do our first soldering. Now my soldering technique is probably not the best. There are probably better videos on YouTube if you want to see how it really should be done. But I get by. And I will try to be as visible as I can with this, but it is nature of the beast that we're working in sort of tight quarters here. We have our first wire. Next cap, we're going to do the same thing with the bus wire, but this one does not share the ground tab with anything else. So it should be easier to get set up. As we go further along, I'll probably spend less time detailing what I did. You guys will get used to, okay, just another solder joint. Alright, I think the next step, let's go ahead and twist our heater wires. And there are pictures on the Mojotone website. So if you ever need a reference of, okay, well, how tight should I be twisting this? That's a good place to go. All right. And then we're going to the red's going to go to the number 2 pin, and the black's going to go to the number 7, and then we will go from there to the next heater. So we may be able to use the cutoffs for that, otherwise we will use the red and black wires that were included in the kit. Let's see how that goes. go ahead and this guy gets grounded. These two pins get grounded together and then to the ground tab, which it does not share with anything else. And now we're just going to keep doing this all the way down for the rest of our tubes. Tie into the previous tube, twist, connect to the appropriate spot, tie into the previous tube, connect, etc. Now these smaller sockets are not going to go to the same place. And these pins number 5 and 4 are actually should be tied together with bus wire too. And I did my first goof up. So I was looking at the picture from its sort of physical orientation, but I did not look closely at the pin numbers, and so I soldered these two guys together when it really should be these two guys together. So now what I can probably do is disconnect this one and then solder this one into the same thing. Functionally, it'll be the correct thing, but read the numbers, not the location on the diagram. All right, after a little bit of gentle persuasion, I have disconnected the 4 and 3 pin, and we will solder the 5 and 4 pins together as it was intended. Won't be as pretty as it should be, but functionally. should be all good. All right, we've got our twisted wires down all here, supplying power to our tubes. We're going to start working on some stuff up across the top, power switches, that kind of thing. But first, these two wires, they are not used, so we are going to snip them off and just use a little bit of shrink tubing to make sure they don't touch anything. Future Eric here. I originally filmed these videos thinking I was going to do it in one release, but I'm at 26 minutes in the edit so far, and nobody's got that kind of attention span. I didn't do an outro here because I didn't think I needed it yet, but here we are. If this is the kind of content you like, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.